And just a couple days later,
okay, everybody, I think it's time that we promised that we'd get started. 5:30. If everybody would come in and sit down, and if we could close the doors in the back, might be helpful. My name is Gerry Baker. I'm with the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission. I'm not a part of this press conference particularly, except to just outline a few of the ground rules we'd like to follow today as we proceed. First of all, we have limited time. Many of us have to scoot right after this. We have big meeting responsibilities that need to be tended to, so we want to move quickly and look forward to dealing with your questions. We're in the business here of focusing on the primer and its contents and what is involved in that and what the work of the Induced Seismicity Working Group has been all about. We really don't intend to open it up to other questions of off topic of the general findings of and specific conclusions of the report. So if questions would be directed that way, I'd appreciate that. Afterwards, we have arranged for a number of people who worked on the report to be here to talk individually with you. At least two of them are here in the front row, Brian Stump and Scott Anderson, who Scott's with EDF and Brian's with SMU, and you may find another one or two out there who will be willing to speak with you on their specific part in the program. And they're welcome to stay as long as they're willing to talk, but I'm going to give our state friends an opportunity to exit. And so if you'd help us by identifying yourself and then asking your questions into the mic, I'd appreciate it. Speaking of Mike, I think Mike Paque, Groundwater Protection Council, do you want to have any words here?
I'll just be real brief. I'm the director of the Groundwater Protection Council, and we're really pleased with the outcome that you've heard about today, and you're going to hear more about. I want to give some credit. I want to give some credit to certainly everybody, but Rick Simmers, who called me initially and inquired about the ability to get what ended up being 13 states principally together to talk about public concerns over induced seismicity motivated by Ohio, and we included the other states for the initial meeting, and I'm proud of everybody and the work that they did. And then equally as proud, if not prouder, of the primer and beyond the hard work that you've heard about and you're going to hear more about. So I'll turn it back to Gerry. Just want to say thanks for everybody.
And I, in turn, going to turn it to, for those of you who have a press kit, or if you need one, let one of our people know here. But I'm going to turn it directly to Rick Simmers, who is in the, whose bio, as well as these other speakers, are in the press kit. So, Rick.
Okay. Thanks. Hey, I wanted to just summarize, if you weren't here for our presentation, this primer is a summary document that 13 states got together to create. State regulatory managers and geological survey staff worked to pull this group together. We worked with at least 60 technical consultants to help come up with the material that's in the primer. And this is a reference document for state regulatory programs, those that regulate Class 2 disposal wells. So it's not a proposed rule, it's not a proposed regulation, it's a reference document for regulators to assist them in a decision-making process should they have to get into this type of issue. With that, if we have any questions, we can go forward.
Rick, would you have one of each person, Rick, would you have each person say what they did in the report, just so that we know where to direct questions?
My name is Rex Buchanan. I'm the director of the Kansas Geological Survey, and the Geological Survey component of folks that worked on this are primarily providing basic background about what we know about monitoring and the events and the mechanisms, the geomechanisms behind these events.
I'm Leslie Savage. I'm the Assistant Director for Technical Permitting in the Oil and Gas Division, the Railroad Commission of Texas. And I started out on this, I think on the monitoring, and it got revised. And so I'm going to claim a little bit of credit for everything. But I was on the work group as well as the editorial committee.
My name is Mike Teague. I'm the Secretary for both Energy and Environment for the state of Oklahoma, and I had nothing to do with writing this report. But I signed up lots of other people for it. So Tim Baker is here from the Corporation Commission. Our geologic survey was part of this, certainly. I think we even had some DEQ folks that were very helpful in this. So,
Questions?
Hi, Paul Monies with the Oklahoman. I understand that your report is kind of a policy guiding document. There's no prescriptions in there for states specifically, but how important are some of the funding issues surrounding states to kind of take care of some of these issues when they come up? Is there money in states to take care of this? I mean, Oklahoma's, we've had budget cuts like other states. I mean, how do you propose fixing some of those funding issues, and is that addressed in the document at all?
no, I think the short answer is that there is nothing in the document that addresses funding because, again, this really is a guidance, a primer to go out to states regardless of where they are in the spectrum of having had an earthquake to 670 above 3.0 this year. I think the resource piece gets to what do you do once you're in the situation. And again, this document is to cover everybody, so nothing specific on funding.
Can you guys hear me?
No.
One question I had is the role of enforcement. Should there be?
It's not on.
You don't want me handling this. Better. Okay. I guess the question I had is.
Can you identify yourself?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's Mike Lee with Energy Wire. Is there a role for enforcement in handling earthquakes? Has any of your states, levied a fine against an operator related to an earthquake? And would that, what role would enforcement play in reducing the number of earthquakes?
I'm going to speak for Ohio. The question was, is there a role for enforcement in, if we decide there is an induced event and it's associated with a Class 2 type activity? A lot of the state regulatory programs are a function of both permitting and regulatory. So yeah, there's a role. Does this necessarily go to a fine or a penalty phase? First, you have to show cause. You have to show that there was correlation between an activity and a seismic event. And if you can demonstrate that there is that correlation, then states will differ on how they approach the mitigation or minimization of the impact from that. Potentially it could include fines or penalties, but most states want to solve a problem. The penalties aren't as important as solving the problem.
For those of you on the phone, that was Rick Simmers, Ohio. We also have reporters writing questions in via email that we will address to you guys as they become available. Any more questions live here?
Thanks. Paul Monies again with the Oklahoman. Obviously, your focus is on the state side of response, but a lot of these Class 2 wells are obviously the primacies at the EPA level, and it's granted to the states. Has there been any threats in any states that you've looked at by the EPA to take over the program for permitting or classification on the Class 2 disposal wells?
Yeah, again, for Oklahoma, and we are probably in this thing deeper than anybody else, there have been no threats from the EPA. As a matter of fact, it's been tremendous cooperation from the EPA. The Region 6 has received a series of, I think they've gotten a dozen petitions requesting that they revoke Oklahoma's primacy. Region 6 is not interested in that at all. As a matter of fact, I think our review from 2014 program review by Region 6 should be coming out this month or next month. Positive of what we're doing and what we are doing proactively to get after these earthquakes. So no threat from the EPA at all. Instead, it's been great cooperation.
Question from from a reporter from the phone, Erica Carr reading.
And if those who have dialed in have a question, they can email me at ecarr@gwpc.org. That's ECARR@gwpc.org, and then I can read those questions. This comes from Megan Hart with the Topeka Capital Journal. She says, this is geared towards Rex Buchanan. I'd like to know at this point what we know about the potential hazards and risk of those hazards being realized in Kansas, and if there is any indication of where the state should start in determining mitigation strategies.
Well, I think we've got a clearer understanding than we had a couple of years ago. I think we understand location through enhanced monitoring. We understand the locations of these events better, magnitude better, and there already has been a response. The Kansas Corporation Commission issued an order in March of this year that required plugging back wells in the Arbuckle in 5 zones of seismic concern. Also required a staged reduction over 30-day increments to bring the volumes of disposal in those wells down. So that's, I think the response has been twofold, both in terms of enhanced monitoring and the order of the KCC. So I think that response is well underway.
Any other questions here locally?
Mike Lee from Energy Wire again. You mentioned during your presentation that the lack of seismic monitors. Do you see a need for a more uniform net of seismic monitors, maybe across the Mid-Con or across all the oil-producing regions?
There already is a national network, obviously, that the U.S. Geological Survey operates, but the sensitivity is obviously not what we would like in terms of resolution, both for depths and locations of these events. I think at this point, enhanced monitoring, we'll take all the monitoring we can get, but I don't know that an enhanced national network is really the answer. In our case, and I think this is probably true in a lot of Oklahoma and Texas as well, they really need arrays that can pinpoint these things down very precisely, and that requires putting a lot of instruments in a small area. That's what we've done, and the USGS has done in some places. So that's, I would say that really isn't, that an enhanced national network really wouldn't get at that. Now I will say that the place that kind of enhanced national monitoring would come in handy, and temporary arrays as well, would be enhanced background information prior to when we see induced events. If we had better background information, it would have been easier to tell what were induced events and what were natural events. So any system that will give us better information on background prior to a series of events, I think folks would welcome, and that's probably where a national monitoring network, an enhanced monitoring network would come in.
Okay, any more questions?
Could I add to that? And it kind of goes to Paul's question too about resources. And so, again, speaking only for Oklahoma, I agree with what Rex just said. We don't need enhanced monitoring all the way across the state. To do that in a state the size of Texas would be incredibly expensive. But we do need some help resource-wise in getting that enhanced monitoring in the specific areas where we're seeing such an increase in seismic activity. That's my shameless plug for money. We don't have it at the state level, so that's my point. Is that's my shameless plug for we need money.
I'd like to add a little bit about that from the Ohio perspective. We're fortunate enough to have funding. We've purchased in the neighborhood of about 30 portable seismometers. We deploy those in areas that we feel need extra monitoring. In addition, a change in our statute and our rules gives us an authority to, through the permitting process, require a company to install monitoring to our standard and then have us part of that monitoring system so that we're seeing that monitoring system in real time so that the companies have some of the burden of helping have the local arrays that are in an area of concern.
And I would say we've also gotten support from the Kansas Corporation Commission for a temporary array. We've gotten some support from our Adjutant General's office for a statewide array. But I would really strongly agree with Mike. The costs that we've incurred and will continue to incur are far beyond anything we've gotten in terms of support in this process.
Anyone else?
Okay, and Rick, this is Mike Lee from Energy Wire again. Rick kind of brought up a sort of an overarching theme. Why not make some across the board recommendations? If Ohio's got a good idea to have the companies pay for monitoring, why not make that recommendation for all the states?
Well, we changed our statute and our rule to give us an authority to require that. We can go back to an existing Class 2 well if we have criteria or we have evidence that monitoring may be necessary. For the new permitting process, as an application's received, if we're in an area where we have some concern based on certain criteria, we could either move our network into that system or we could tell the company that as part of your application, you're going to have to create your own system, link it to our system, and then do that. We don't want to prescribe that to every state. For Ohio, that happens to work, but it required a legislative change. And again, this primer isn't meant to prescribe what each state should do. It should provide options for states to choose as best fits into their program.
Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? Nothing online or by email? One last check. Reminding you in the meantime that we have, I'd like to excuse the state people to go about their business, or if they feel inclined to stay, that's fine. Tim Baker's here from Oklahoma. Ivan Wong, consultant, seismologist extraordinaire. Brian Stump, again, independent review team, and Scott Anderson, Environmental Defense Fund, who are all involved in this program. You're welcome to question them as long as they want to stay as well. So with that, I'm sorry, I'll turn it over to Erica Carr for just a quick closing comment, and then you guys can go if you want to take off.
For those of you who are dialing in, we have a media kit that is available, as well as you can download the full primer. I've been told it's pronounced, at www.statesfirstinitiative.org. You can also find us on Twitter at States First. It's States, the number 1, ST. And follow us there. But you can download the primer. There's a press release. There's also FAQs, key messages, a lot of information that you may need. And then if you have further questions, contact information there for where you can get further information. You can contact either Gerry or I. We can point you in the right direction. Thank you so much. This concludes the press conference.